What's up with Ghost Machine comics? That's a real question that I have, and I had that question since the beginning. I also believe that this was the last video that I put up on the channel talking about this edition of Ghost Machine collecting these stories, of which I said was a really good idea if they had stuck to it, which they didn't, but some of them still have some good ideas. The first issue, I believe, for all of these titles was priced regularly at $5, give or take a few dollars, and it was 50 plus pages at least. I know it was minimum 50. It could have been up to 80 pages for $5. That's a deal in this industry. That's a deal. I watched the Casually Comics. I believe her name is Sasha. I really like that channel because she talks about comic books like she enjoys them. And while that may sound crazy to you and me, that's something that you don't get a lot in comic books. You see that with movies, you see that with sports. I keep up very heavily with MMA and boxing. All these former fighters, all these competitors, all these people who are covering MMA outside of a select few that are just annoying in general, you get this impression that, oh, they care about what they're talking about. Former fighters such as Chael Sonnen and Michael Bisping, Cormier, all the former champions have YouTube channels now. But you get this impression that they enjoy it, what they're talking. They enjoy talking about MMA. They watch the fight. They have these videos and they come over and they're like, oh, what a fight. You have the Dustin Poirier, Islam Makhachev fans fight. I know I'm losing some comic book fans here for a second, but you have that fight over the weekend that was a dog fight, and you see them talk about it, and Dustin Poirier is the best in the world behind these guys, but he's still one of the best. And you have this interest and enthusiasm for MMA and MMA commentary and these fighters and what is happening in the fight game. But in comic books, well, you have some live streams here and there, and on the live stream you have some middle-aged men sitting in front of the computer screen with the phone the camera this close to their face and scrolling on some random comic book journalism website, which journalism in general is dead. And I love journalism that isn't. I don't say that proudly, but it's true, unfortunately. So you have these AI generated articles that they're reading, and it's outrage, and it's this, and they're selling you on this thing and this war in the culture. But the last thing they're doing is selling you comic books. Oh, by the way, and I don't mean to make light of this topic, the people that you can watch that enjoy comic books, that talk about comic books for the love of the craft, for the love of the medium, one of them just recently, and it's abhorrent in its entirety, was bullied into suicide. And I don't say that lightly. I made a community post about said issue very recently, discussing all of my feelings on it, not to brush over this topic, but Cartoonist Kayfabe, the channel that I'm referring to, were the leading men in keeping comic books alive. As a matter of fact, there's a reason that I've gotten in so far into Jack Kirby and the like, and all these classic books. That I'm watching a lot of their reviews on EC. I see their work on Mobius, and it's two guys, sometimes three. I believe Tom Sholey joined Piskor and Jim Rugg occasionally, that would just sit down. They'd have a comic book open, and your boy Zach made a funny comment about these guys, is that Cartoonist Kayfabe can't read because they only ever talk about the artwork. Hardly do they talk about the stories. And I'm sure I've lost most of my viewership by now. This video is about Ghost Machine. But I'm saying all these things for a reason. Take my word for it. This is going to play into it later. But I bring up Casually Comics because as far as comic book YouTube creators are concerned, like I said, she talks about comics like she enjoys them, like she enjoys reading them. You see the shelf behind her in the backdrop of videos. As you see with me, what is it? That's Batman there. I have some JoJo characters here. You have little Abakio here. A friend gave this to me. And you look at the backgrounds of these other people. Now, the difference is she's not selling you a comic book. Some of those live streamers, a good majority of them, are in fact selling you their own books and their own products, which is a topic into itself. But the commonality between somebody like Casually Comics and somebody like Cartoonist Kayfabe is, well, they like it. I like comic. I'm going to sit down, I'm going to read this comic. Well, now I'm going to talk about it with you guys. And that's partially what I'm trying to be. I'm not as big a fan as they are. I never will be. But I am a fan of good storytelling and good artwork, and of the good storytelling and the good artwork that I found, the highest volume of it is in comic books. And that's important, and I'll get to that right now, as a matter of fact. So what's up with Ghost Machine? You don't have a whole lot of people talking about it. You didn't have a whole lot of people that understood what it is. We now know that it's just an imprint of Image comic books, owned primarily by Geoff Johns and subsequently his artists, that's going to come out, that they're going to be able to use to sell pitches. And I bring this up specifically to discuss what makes this important and why this actually means a whole lot. Because in some of the press releases that they wrote themselves, the Ghost Machine creators, they said, well, we want new books and we don't care the cost and we want good paper and we want the best artists and creator-owned storytelling and this and all these different things. What they really wanted was to sell a lot of really good pitches to Amazon in one place. I went over that in the last video. You should go check that out. But at no point, they say they want the best paper. They say they want the best quality. They say they do it for the love of the craft, and yet hardly anybody's talking about it. I'm talking about it because I have nothing better to do with my time. I'm a guy on the internet who has a drawing table right behind me that goes to local shows, sells my artwork, and is stupid enough to want to be in comics. And I don't say that pessimistically. You have to be a little bit nutty to think that you can succeed in comic books in the year 2024. I'm one of those nutty people. So I'm reading this book and I think, okay, well, there's one or two good stories in it. The rest of them is obviously stuff to be pitched to some streaming service. But when Casually Comics is the most notable channel talking about these books, when you don't have these other comic book channels discussing these, what is the value of a serialized product if not the discussion of that product? And I know people get a little twisted when you say product. What is the value of these books if nobody's talking about the books? People talk about JoJo, and JoJo isn't released here in the States. They have to go to sites to read translations made by other fans, read it online, which is a drag in itself, but they read it simply to keep up with it because they like it. I see more discussion of people who actually read, purchase, and reread and watch and do all these things with a foreign book from Japan that you have to go through all these hoops to get, more so than I see people talk about Ghost Machine. And of the people that talk about Ghost Machine, I'll bring Casually Comics back into the mix. I watched your video on Junkyard Joe. I believe that's the title of one of these books, of the unknown universe, because everything has to be a universe now. You can't just tell original stories. But the unknown universe and Junkyard Joe, and she reviews the book, and she's a very honest reviewer. She's very optimistic a person, so you can take her word on these things. And what was the review? The review was, well, there were tropes, and it was a lot like this other thing, but it wasn't bad. But, it might not be your cup of tea. And that's the review. Great review. I really enjoyed the video. But I took a lot of things from that video. Of a book that I didn't read, I will be forthright with it. So I'm not going to speak like I have, but I will speak on what I've been speculating about these things. One of the things is, it's illustrated by Gary Frank. And one of the things that you're going to see in comic books these days is there are a lot of artists that are good that I don't quite digest, that I can't quite sit right with. And the reason for that is not all artists are meant for every book. And when you listen to a review of Junkyard Joe, well, he's not in it a lot. Okay, he's not in it a lot. The main character isn't in the book a lot. I just made a video about Jack Kirby and what we can learn from him. Put the title character doing something cool in every issue, right? Well, he's not really there a whole lot. And there are all these other characters. And you have some of the tropes over the generations of, well, yeah, the super characters are always with the Earth characters. And I'd never liked that personally. But you have that there, but then it's tropes. It's the Iron Giant. It's this, it's that. And somebody in the comments said, well, actually, they wanted to make a series about this old character at DC. DC wouldn't let them, so they did it themselves at this other place. Okay. Well, when you read this book about Geiger, Mr. Geiger, and you realize, well, he's not even in costume most of the time. He's in that hood for a majority of even this short story in here. I just have to ask this question when it comes to something like Ghost Machine. With what's up with Ghost Machine? Why are they doing all these imprints? People like Scott Snyder, people like that. It's not a secret. I'm not uncovering some grand truth that's been covered up by them. Well, they're not doing it for the sake of making really cool, fun comic books. They're doing it for the sake of, well, I think I can make money over here as opposed to over here. And I think that's really sad that you have these imprints and it's creator owned and it's this, and it all boils down to how much money can I make outside of comics? You guys are the best comic book writers according to the fans, according to most the few people that still discuss comics. You're considered the best writers and best artists, and your best bet at making money is doing it somewhere else. I don't have a whole lot else to say. What do you guys think about that? Why do you guys go to the shop and do you buy these books? Because apparently they're successful. Although the shop that I bought that book from said that they were force-fed a whole lot of extra copies, so the sales figures are kind of skewed when they say, we sold out, we have to go to reprints. Well, you force-fed yourself to be sold out. And as far as we're doing this for the love of comics, well, if you're doing it for the love of comics, comic book stores are in that equation. And if these stores are being given merchandise that they can't sell, are you really helping them or are you hurting them? These are very important questions that I feel like aren't being considered. And they're not. Truthfully, they're not. If they were, then you would see that. But it's just a weird thing. I think it's sad because I think there's a whole lot of potential for comic books going into the future, going into the past. Manga is successful. So I really couldn't tell you. Is this going to be an ongoing series? The artists seem to be invested. But why are they doing it? And if you can't figure out why they're doing it, or if the reason why they're doing it is not actually to make a good sellable book, it's actually to do something else, well then, nobody really wins in all of these circumstances. Can we just love comics again?